As we move towards the drive to net zero, we've introduced heat interface units for large residential projects. So essentially, putting the heat interface unit in can be sized on several factors. For example, on this specific apartment here, we've labelled each room and zoned up each apartment. So each room in apartment 31 is zoned as such. We can display on the options the zone references. So you can look at the combined heat loss from that particular apartment on a zonal basis when applying your heat interface unit. So what we do, we insert from the menu here the heat interface unit. I'll just go into an existing one. So this gives us the dialog box where we enter the information. Based on the codes of practice, COP1, there are tables which determine the hot water output based on the number of appliances for 1 bathroom, 2 bathrooms, 3 bathrooms, or a single outlet, or an entered value. You select the item you want in line with the codes of practice, or you can enter your own value here. So we'll assume this is a single bathroom. Same applies with the space heating. You can apply the space heating on a zonal basis, as is the case here. You can apply the space heating on an entered load, which you can enter by hand. You can enter from the codes of practice based on the number of bathrooms as above from tables, or you can actually use the connected load. Now, word of warning here, you have to have the load connected in order to do so. Don't go and select the connected option if you don't have radiators secondaries in the apartment. So that's only available if you actually, as we have here, a connected load. So you select the heating load based on the source or the zone or the tables from the codes of practice. So I'll refer back to apartment 31. So with your heat interface unit, you run your pipe runs back to your main entry point in the boiler room in the property as the landlord's primaries. And generally, the pipe selection rule will be adopted on the general information. So when you put that system together, the general information will determine and you select the pipe selection rule that you want to use. So in this case, we're doing steel medium 8271. When we put our secondary system in, the entry point is determined at the heat interface unit. So you double click on the entry point node and you select the pipe selection rule that you want here. Obviously, if you've got a flow of 82 into the apartment, you're not going to have select a system with a flow of 90 from the secondary side. It's got to be less. So simple physics that, it's a heat exchanger. So so you would select this selection rule. So the selection rule of the secondary is determined at the HIU, and you would run your pipe runs from your radiator back to the entry point, and you select the entry point button as you do with a combination boiler. What the program does, it diversifies the loads. So as you move up towards the entry point, you will see your diversified heating and hot water loads on the pipe runs. So if we then perform the calculation and run the calculation for the main heating system, we can see here a final connection to a heat interface unit. When I look at the results and check the results, we have in the listing here a whole set of data. So we can see here we've got the heating load in kilowatts, we've got the diversity, well obviously being the final connection it'll be 100%, and it's the same with the hot water. There's the load diversified based on the codes of practice and the number of bathrooms, etc., and the flow rate. If I then move up towards the entry point, we start seeing diversity on the flow rates. So for example, if I select that pipe, we've now got a heating diversity factor of 74.66. We've got the heating load, and we have the same with the hot water. We have the diversity there as a percentage, and we actually have the diversified load. So as you move up towards the entry point, once you get to the 7th appliance, in line with codes of practice, the diversity remains the same. It uses the same factor each time. Obviously that will adjust the flow rates, but the factor used will be the same after the 7th appliance. For more details on the calculations, go and download the codes of practice, and that shows all the calculation methodologies in there, in line with the latest codes of practice issued by CIBSE. Moving into public health, we can connect the secondaries and the hot and cold water to our heat interface unit. So effectively, you are tapping in your main system to your appliances. Here we have dishwasher, sinks, toilets, etc. Yet to pipe up the shower. And also we've got our hot water connection, which is served as an entry point. So the cold feed is effectively a load. So you start at the load end and connect into the pipe run. When you run the hot water circuit, that is effectively the entry point of the system. So again, to select your pipe selection rule on the entry point of this system, there's the information there on the cold feed and the hot water feed. So the hot water feed basically is the pipe type is basically determined from the general information for the hot system. So these pipe selection rules relate to the hot and cold water services on the output from the heat interface unit. Irrespective of the number of appliances you have, it strictly looks at the tables from the codes of practice. So no matter how appliances you have, it'll just be based on the number of bathrooms or single appliance or number of bedrooms. So it uses the codes of practice to determine the diversified loads to the heat interface unit on the landlord supply pipework setup.